Now we're going to do the same types of problems using the rational root test, but we're going to use our calculators, and it's going to make this significantly less work for us. We're going to list out the possible rational roots. So that's p over q. I'm going to do some scratch work over here. So our p over q, p is our last number, which is -1. The only factor of 1 is 1. And then our q is 5. And there are only two factors of 5, which are 1 and 5. So my list is pretty short here. My rational roots could be positive or -1, or positive or -1/5. All right, for the biggest negative and smallest positive, there's a pattern that you can follow. So for the biggest negative, that is always going to be your p number, but it's going to be negative. So whatever that last number is, regardless of what sign it is, you always want it to be negative. So the last number here is a 1. I want to make it a -1. That's going to be my biggest number that's a negative. And then the smallest positive is always going to be, so smallest positive right here, smallest positive is always going to be 1 divided by, 1 divided by your q number. So here our q number is 5, so our smallest positive is going to be 1 divided by 5, or 1/5. That's all you need to know in order to use your calculator. The only other extra information that you might want to know is that your biggest negative is going to be your table start setting, and your smallest positive is going to be your delta table, which is the steps, like how far apart each of your table values are. So I'm going to go to my calculator, and the first thing I need to make sure that I do, which is something I always forget, is you need to make sure that you type in your function. If you don't type in your function, you're not going to be able to get the right answer, because you won't have, your calculator won't be calculating the right things. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to y equals, clear everything out that's already there, and I'm going to type in 5x cubed, and then arrow to the right to get out of your exponent, plus x squared minus 5x minus 1. And it's super duper important that you have this typed in correctly, because like I said, if you have the wrong function in there, you're definitely not going to get the right answer. So now we're going to go to second window, and we're going to change our table start to our biggest negative, which was -1. And our delta table is going to be 1/5, and I'm going to type in 1 divided by 5. It's always better to put in the fraction versus the decimal, because sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not, so it's better just to do the same thing every time. So now I'm going to go to my table, so I'm going to press second graph, and since I started at -1, I get to stop looking at +1, and I can see right here all on one screen that I have 3 zeros. The first one is at -1, and I know it's a 0 because if I looked at my y column, I see a 0 there. So I have -1. I also have a 0 at -0.2, which is actually the fraction -1/5. And then I also have a 0 at +1. So those are my 3 rational roots. So this problem has all 3 rational roots. It doesn't have any irrational roots, and it has no imaginary roots. So I'm going to go back here to my thing here, and I'm going to write this down, that I had a rational root at -1, -0.2, which like I said is the same as -1/5, and either of those answers would be acceptable, and then also at +1.